Hey everybody, welcome back to part 4 of using VBA to create an email machine. Again, the email machine can be used to send emails, reports, customize attachments to a million people if that's what your office or you would like to actually do. So in today's tutorial, we're going to be talking about locking parts of the tool so that your users cannot change or select different things within the tool. We want to make sure that you control what they use and what they see. We're going to be talking about a very, very important programming concept called loops. So all programming languages have the concept of looping. Every programming language has several different types of loops, including VBA. So in today's tutorial, we're going to be talking about loops, but specifically we're going to talk about for each loops. We're going to talk about locking and unlocking the sheet using VBA. We're going to be talking about activating the sheets. We will continue to talk about debugging, which is, as we discussed last time, which is, of course, as we discussed last time, figuring out where are the problems, where are the errors in the code, so we can problem solve and we can fix those. We're going to talk about changing the sheet name and using the code name. So every spreadsheet has two names in VBA. You have the regular sheet name and then you have the code name. We're going to talk about making sheets visible and invisible, or in other words, hidden and not hidden. And in VBA, we're able to hide a sheet so that even your users can't even unhide it. Have you ever gotten an Excel spreadsheet where you couldn't unhide a spreadsheet? You knew that it was there, but you couldn't unhide it and you couldn't figure out why? Today we're going to show you how to do that, and you're going to be able to create those kind of spreadsheets as well. We're going to talk about collections. Collections are groups of objects within VBA. We'll talk about leaving comments again for yourself. We'll talk about variables, data types, declaring data types in VBA. IntelliSense, which is a really cool way of writing code, and Microsoft has it built in, so it'll kind of help you a little bit writing that code along the way. Another really important programming concept is something called if-then statements. If you're really good with Excel, you probably know if statements, but in VBA, really super important. In all programming languages, you have to have conditional. So if something happens, then do this. VBA, just like every other programming languages, also has an if-then statement. We're going to talk about the go-to command and markers. If you want your code to skip a whole bunch of lines, we're going to show you how to do that today. We're going to talk about protecting and unprotecting your sheets and using passwords. Again, within VBA, you're going to password protect your tool, but using VBA. So your users just can't unhide or unprotect your sheet. This also allows you to protect your own work, your own intellectual property. So if you like today's tutorial, please subscribe, smash that like button, and make sure that you hit that notification bell. Now, without further ado, let's go to the tutorial. So here's where we left off from the last video. We have our tool that fully operates, it completely works. We can go back and forth between the two screens or the two tabs. To the average person, it will only look like a tab when you're here, but once you go back, it's not going to look like a tab. It's just going to look like standalone software. But here's the issue. Some of these cells, a person could accidentally just begin to write in here. And we really don't want that, do we? We really want to make sure that users of our tool only type and are only allowed to type here, and only the places that we want them to be able to type into. So why don't we do this? Let's go ahead And what we're going to do is I'm going to remove those. What I do is I press the delete button. What we really want to do is we want to be able to lock the spreadsheet. We want to be able to lock this sheet, right? And then when we go here, we want to be able to unlock it because we do want people to be able to type in here, right? So what we're going to have to do is let's go back, okay? And so let's go to our VBA editor. And here is our VBA editor right over here. And in today's lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to be learning all about loops. Looping or loops is a very, very common term. It's a very, very common function that exists in all programming languages, so including VBA. So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to loop through a code. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to just unlock and show all of the hidden sheets. So I'm going to press this button. I'm going to go to this this sub that we created last time. I'm going to press, and it unhides, but and it unlocks the tool, but it still keeps some of the other tabs hidden. So I'm going to go over here, and now I click this one, and it goes back to the main sheet, the main page. So what I really want to do is I want to unlock and unhide all sheets. So I can go to the unhide sub right over here, and let's step through it. So stepping through means I'm going to go line by line, and I'm going to press F8 for each time. So let's take a look. I'm going line by line. It's unlocking the tool. It's activating certain sheets. But at the same time, it made some of the other sheets very hidden. What I really want this to do is I want to create a sub where it unhides, unlocks the entire workbook, all the sheets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. Don't want to waste the code. We want to just be able to recycle the code if we can, right? So now what I'm going to do is I don't want to make visible only one sheet. What I really want to do is I want to make all the sheets visible, right? So here's what I can do. Let me get rid of this one, and let's get rid of this one. And we have 3 sheets, and you can see how many sheets we have right over here, right? Sheet 3, sheet 5, sheet 6, and in the parentheses are the actual names. We learned last time that when we refer to a sheet as sheet 3, sheet 5, sheet 6, that is their code name. That doesn't change unless you manually change it in the code, and you actually could go ahead and do that. If you wanted to actually change that, you could just go over here, you click on the sheet, and right over here, this first one is the sheet, is sheet 3, and if I just highlighted that and rewrote a new name, that would become the new code name, but we're going to leave it for now like this, okay? So what I can do is I can just make every sheet visible. So I'm going to copy this, and remember I also have to give this sub a new name because you can't have 2 subs with the same name. So I'm going to call it unhide all sheets reset. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. And so let's run this code, and it worked. Now, what happens if I added a new sheet, and now we have sheet 3, and sheet 3 named right over here is the code name is actually sheet 4, but every single time I create a new sheet, now I have to retype in the name of that sheet over here, so I can make sure that next time I run the code and I unhide everything, then I would be able to reset, unhide, make everything visible, unlock everything in one shot. So I would have to keep typing in all of the names of the sheets every time. Well, what happens if I forget? What happens if I forget to type in that sheet name? So this is really where looping comes into play. Looping allows you to write just a couple of lines of code, and what it says is this. It says, Excel, I want you to go through every sheet, regardless of how many there are, and make them all visible. So I could add 100 sheets. It wouldn't matter. It would go through the whole collection of sheets. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to remove this. And let's remember, this is where we can write comments so we know what we're doing. So I'm going to write the, looping to unlock and unhide all sheets. Okay, the code is not going to even look at that. That's strictly for me. The lines in black and blue are for Excel for the code, and the lines in green are for humans. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to first want to understand what a variable is. So let's just say for argument's sake, I need to write a very long number. Now, if I have to write this number and Excel is thinking, why are you writing this number? But for now, it's fine. So if I need to write a really, really long number every single time, it's going to be really cumbersome for me to keep writing this number again and again and again. Look how many digits it is, right? So I don't want to keep writing this, and who knows, I might make an error. So what I can do is I can say, instead of writing this number every time in the code, what I can do is I can just say, I just want to refer to this as X, right? So this is really, in many ways, it's a lot of times it's for the human, because we don't want to make mistakes, and it's just easier for us to write one letter or a couple of letters. And when you think about it, a variable is just the name of an object. It refers to something within the code, and it's just like you. Instead of, maybe when you were in school, the kids didn't just call you kid, hey kid with the blue jacket and the blue pants and the book bag. They would call you by your name. Hey Bill, hey Mary, hey Richard. They give you a name. So it's the same thing. Variables are just simply names referring to something. So after we give in VBA, and again this is for all programming languages, what we also want to do to make it easy is we want to declare what X really means. Now again, I could call this long number, I could call it anything I want. If I want to call it hamburger, I could do that. I could literally just leave it as hamburger. But the other thing too in VBA is we want to be able to say to VBA, hey VBA, I want to let you know what hamburger is. Hamburger does refer to this number, but it also means it's a number. So we want to declare what kind of data type is it? What is it? Is it letters? Is it numbers? Is it something? Is it like, does it mean sheet? Does it mean worksheets? Does it mean workbook? Does it mean an action? So what we want to do is we want to declare a data type. So before we even declare the variable, what we want to do is we want to declare what kind of data type it is. So how we declare a data type is this. We write dim, meaning dimension. We write the name, dim hamburger, as integer. And then after we say what hamburger means, what kind of data type it is, then we can say exactly what it is. We can say dim peanuts as string, and peanuts
equals book bag. And again, we can change this to anything we want. We could call it X. So that would mean every time in the code, every time I want to refer to this number, instead of saying typing out this whole number, I would just write hamburger. And every time I want Excel to refer to book bag or write book bag or print book bag, instead of writing book bag, I can just call it X. So there's different kinds of data types. We have integer and string, which are the most common. So another data type is actually an item, a thing within Excel. So one of those things in Excel is a worksheet. So I'm going to say, I'm going to declare, to make it easy, I don't want to have to keep writing worksheet, right? And you can't actually use the name worksheet because it's already a data type. So I'm going to say WS, dim WS as worksheet. So this way, every time Excel sees WS, it knows I really mean worksheet. In VBA, declaring data types is actually optional. You don't have to declare it, but it is better to declare it because sometimes it saves a little bit in space, and then it also can prevent some errors. So you don't actually have to say dim, but most people do. So I'm going to declare WS means it's a variable for worksheet. So now let's get into looping. The looping that we're going to do, there's different kinds of looping. We have do until, we have some other ones, do while. For this looping, we're going to refer to it as for each. So what I'm going to do is what I really want to do is I want Excel to loop through and go through every single sheet and unhide it. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to write for each WS. Remember, this WS, Excel already knows every time I write WS, that means worksheet. Any worksheet. For each WS in, and now I have to say the collection. A collection of all of the worksheets. So the collection of worksheets within Excel, you refer to it as worksheets with the S. For each WS in worksheets, then we're going to do something and then next. Next means go back and do it again and again and again until you've gone through each worksheet in the collection of worksheets. So what do we want to do? For each worksheet in worksheets, what we want to do is we want to unhide it. So what we want to do is I'm going to tab, give it a little bit of space. So for each worksheet, I can just write WS dot, and now the IntelliSense comes up. IntelliSense knows that I'm referring to a worksheet. That's why we declared it at the very beginning. If we did not declare WS as a worksheet, this IntelliSense wouldn't come up because Excel doesn't know WS. What is it? Is it a number? Is it a thing? Is it an integer? Is it a string? It doesn't know. But because we declared WS as a worksheet, now Excel is saying, hey, these are the available actions that go along with worksheet. And in Excel, actions are also called methods. So I type WS dot and all the methods come up. Now what do I want to do? I want to make each worksheet visible. Visible equals, and I go down here, and visible. So what is this going to do? What this is going to do is it's going to loop through every worksheet, and then it's going to make each worksheet visible. So let's go back. Let's hide them all. Okay, let's hide everything if we can. We added this worksheet, so I'm going to remove that for now because there's nothing there. But let's hide everything. So now look, everything's hidden except the main page, the main spreadsheet, right? So let's see if this works. And we can leave this here. We're not actually going to be using these. We can remove those. It won't matter as long as we don't refer to them. For now, let's just keep it. Again, as you recall, to go through the lines of code one by one, you're going to use step into or step through, F8. So I'm going to put my cursor, I'm going to make it, put the cursor anywhere within this particular sub, and I'm going to begin. F8. So now I'm stepping through it. Line by line. And notice each time I press, it's doing something. Now we are now at the loop. If I put my cursor over the different names, okay, you will see what is behind that variable. Now it goes to next, so now it's going to go back and it loops again, loops back, and it goes through each one. And now it ends. So instead of having to write out each sheet name, it's now going to just go through every worksheet within the collection of all worksheets. Now, what if I want to hide all the sheets? So I'm going to copy this. Remember, we just want to reuse some of the code. And what I want to do is I'm going to get rid of this right here. I don't want to keep I don't want to have to keep writing every sheet name out. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to highlight these and I'm going to comment out. So right now the comment out symbol is not visible only because my window is small. If I make it bigger, now you'll see it. And so right over here I comment it out. I'm going to take this code, copy, and I'm going to put it over here. And again, what I want to do is I want to declare in this sub as well that WS stands for worksheet, is a worksheet. The data type is worksheet. And so, but instead of this code is actually going to make them all hidden, right? So instead of saying WS visible equals Excel sheet visible, I want to change that to Excel, and to make the IntelliSense come up, go back a little bit, and I'm going to make them all very hidden. Now let's go through this. I'm going to make this, I'm going to minimize this, and again, let's step through this using F8. And now it's going to make all the sheets very hidden. And look what happened. I came across a runtime error. So I'm going to click debug, and I'm going to find out, wait, why can't it make this last sheet invisible? Why can't it make it very hidden? We said this in a previous video, that Excel must have at least one sheet that's not hidden. You have to have at least one sheet that is visible. So that's really where the bug came from. So we're going to stop here. Let's stop the code. Let's make everything, let's reset. Let's make everything visible again. This is the code that we just created, so I'm going to run it. And now everything is back. Now what we really want to do is we really want the code to go through every worksheet, and we want the code to make every sheet hidden, very hidden, except sheet 5. Remember, this is the code that's going to go back to sheet 5, which is the main page, which is this one. So we want to make every other sheet invisible except main, or the code name, which is sheet 5. So here's how we're going to do that. We're going to say for each sheet, WS, for each worksheet in Worksheets, we're going to say if WS dot code name equals, this is case sensitive. So if I wrote, so I'm going to say sheet 5, see right over here it says sheet 5, it's a capital letter S. If this were a lowercase s, this would not work. So it's case sensitive, so you have to make sure that you write exactly like this. If WS dot code name equals sheet 5, then what I really want you to do is just bypass this line of code. So I'm going to add a little, I'm going to add some space between these, make it a little easier, to read, right? So what I really want, again, this to do is I want this to say, hey, if you get to sheet 5, skip it. So this is how we would make the VBA code skip a line. I would write go to, and I can create a marker. So I'm going to put a marker right over here, and I'm going to call it skip this. I can call this anything I want. I could call it hamburgers, I could call it hot dogs. As you can see, I like to eat. But I can call this anything I want. I can call this Chevy Corvette, anything I want. So what I want the code to do is this. As it's looping, if it sees a worksheet and the worksheet's code name is sheet 5, then I want it to go to skip this. Otherwise, just keep looping. So let's get rid of some of the space, make it a little easier again to read. Now watch. We're going to hide all sheets except this main one. I'm going to step through it again. F8. See? Now it's, look at that. And it's done. And this time, it left this sheet unhidden. We can still see it. And there was no runtime error. There's no error at all. Now we began today's video also saying we would like to be able to lock the sheet. We want it to be able to lock the sheet. Remember, we could still write in these cells and we don't want that. So let's go back now. What we wanted to do is this. We want to loop through this code, right? So we want Excel to go through every worksheet, and every time it sees a worksheet, for each worksheet, we want it to make it hidden and we want it to protect it. So this is how we do protection. WS, and now the IntelliSense will come up, and the action or the method is protect. And intuitively, if it was already locked, then the method would be unprotect. But for now, we're going to use protect. Okay, so now let's go back. Let's unhide everything. And now let's run through it. And now the code is done. But look, it's still not locked. I can still type in this one. Why is that? Because we told the code that if it sees sheet 5, which is this main sheet, then go to skip this, meaning it'll just skip this. It'll start the code right here. What we want to do is we still want, regardless, even if it is sheet 5, we still want Excel to protect it. So we're going to copy this, and even after it goes to skip this, but before it gets to the next, this command to go back loop, we still want it to protect. So I'm going to paste that. Let's try it again. So let's unhide everything. And let's step through it, F8. And it's done. And now let's try it. So look, the code worked. So it didn't throw an error. It still made all the sheets hidden except the main sheet, and it's still on sheet 5, the main sheet, it still made it protect. Now we protected all the sheets, so when we unhide, we're going to actually have to go back and we're going to have to add this line of code to this one so it doesn't throw an error, so it still unprotects everything. And what if you want to add a password? You want to password protect something. So you don't, right now it could easily be unprotected, right? What if I want to add a password? So let's just add a password. All we have to do is press space and quotes, and let's call it, let's make the password 123. And remember, we have to add this here, right? And let's run this code again. So now it's all password protected. Let's go back to unhide. Let's go back to unhide, and I'm going to press this. So let's go back now and let's unhide all of the sheets. So now I'm going to go to this. This is the code that we were just making. We added the unprotect and the looping for the making it visible. So now I'm going to put the cursor anywhere in the sub, click here and run it, and look what happens. So now it did run an error, but it's asking me for the password. So I can go ahead and I can type it in. And now it's going to ask me for all of them. And if I click cancel away, any sheet that I didn't press the password or type in the password, it's going to make it, it's still going to keep it protected, password protected. So how do we run the code so it unprotects it with the password? Same way. And now it won't do that again. So let's hide everything except the main. And now let's run it here. And look, it didn't ask me for any password at all. So now we have two bonuses I'd like to present to you. The first bonus is an alternative to using markers and skip this. So I'd like to show you an alternative way. Before we talked about when you get into the loop, right? So this is going to loop. When it gets to sheet 5, it's just going to skip all these lines and go to the marker that we called skip this. An alternative and really an arguably better way to code this would be for us to do it a little differently. So instead of saying, we're going to continue to say if ws dot codename equals sheet 5, then instead of us telling the code to go to skip this, the marker, we're going to do it a little differently. We're going to say if the code name is sheet 5, then we're going to have multiple lines here, so we're going to have to go to the next line. When you have multiple then statements, you need to go to the next line. So now we're going to write ws, we can even keep this. We can say we want to keep the password protection, right? But we don't want it to hide this other stuff. So we're going to copy this and then remove it. So it's going to say if the worksheet's name is sheet 5, then you can protect it or unprotect it. However, for all others, in other words, else, and this is the else statement, we're going to continue. I'm going to paste that other stuff in there now. And when we have if and else in the code, we also have to end this if statement with an end if. Okay, otherwise it will throw an error. So here's what the code is saying. It's going to go through every worksheet. If it sees the worksheet's code name is sheet 5, then it's only going to protect it. For all other worksheets, it's going to make them invisible or very hidden and protect it. Now we don't need this any longer, so we can get rid of that. Now let's go ahead and run this code and let's see if it works. And you can see it did in fact work. It locked only codename sheet 5, which is the main, right? It only protected it. It didn't hide it, but it did hide and protect all the other ones. We can also get rid of this, obviously, because this is no longer necessary. And let's see if we can run this code again. Let's just make sure that it runs correctly. And again, no errors. We can now go back and unhide all the sheets. And let's try it one more time. So using if, else, and end if are preferable ways in writing the same code that we just wrote. The other way that we wrote the code may be possibly a little easier for humans to read and understand, which is the reason why I showed you that method first. But this way is a preferable method. It's just cleaner script, and later on you'll see why using markers sometimes is a great idea and sometimes it's not. Now the second bonus. Let's take a look at variables one more time. So here we had to write the word password, or we had to write the password 123 several times, right? So as we said, we use variables because we can call a variable something that makes sense to us, and then it also helps us avoid having to write the code or the number or the object multiple times, and I can make a mistake. And if I write 124 and then I try to unlock it, it won't work because the password is really 123. So it'll cause some issues, right? So what we can do is let's create a variable, and we're going to call it, the password is going to be called password. Now again, I could call, and let's just put 123 in there. Okay. Now again, I could call this password anything. I could call it PS. I could call it PW. I could call it Tesla. I could call it anything I want. For our purposes here, we're just going to call it password. So now, instead of having to write password each time I see the password, I can just go ahead and just write password. Notice I don't put variables in quotation marks. See the way we had quotation mark here? Variables are never in quotation marks. However, the word that it stands for, or the number that it stands for, or the object it may stand for, can be in parentheses. But also, let's just go ahead. Let's declare the data type. So we're going to say dim password as integer. Now, since the password is an integer, it's a number, I do not have to put quotation marks around it. Okay, so let's just take a look. Let's see if this code is going to work. So I'm going to press, and let's see if it runs any errors. And there you go. It worked. I could say it's a string, meaning it's like letters, right? So if it's a string, then I'm going to put it in quotation marks. But again, notice that if I change the password, I only need to change it one time, and then it filters all the way down to all of these. So let's try it again. Let's see if it runs. You see? So it caused no issues whatsoever, and it did what it needed to do. Okay? One last thing is that variables only exist as long as the sub is running. So this password and this variable will exist, but only as long as the code is running and as long as this sub is running. There is a way for us to share variables across the project, or it's also possible to send a variable across to another sub. And there's different ways that one sub can actually call upon another sub to do something, and then it comes back. And so there is a way that you can pass information and variables from one sub to the other, but for now, our purposes, just remember that for now, a variable only exists within its own sub. And I just want to also show you one more thing. Let's say I added 2 additional sheets. And before, we were actually hard coding it. We were actually typing in the names of the spreadsheets. But running these codes, there's no names of spreadsheets. Let's see if it would still hide all of the sheets except main. So I'm going to put my cursor here, and I'm going to run the code. And look at that. No error. And it still hid all of the sheets. And it doesn't matter. I could add 100 sheets. Now it runs a loop, through every sheet. So now I can unhide all the sheets. And there you go. So now let's take a look. I'm going to make sure that everything is unhidden and unprotected. And this sub right here is connected to this button. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the button. And now I'm going to go back. Let's test it. And let's test it one more time. Up. It ran it ran an error. So let's take a look. Let's debug it. What's the problem here? So if you look, we put our cursor over WS. We see that it's referring to sheet 3, and it's trying to make sheet 3 hidden. Here's the problem. Remember, this is sheet 3, and it can't hide itself. It can't hide the last sheet. Remember, there always has to be at least one sheet that's visible. So going back to this, what we really want this code to do is unhide sheet 5 first. So we're going to stop the code. And for this one, we are going to we're going to hard code it. We're going to say, even before it gets into the loop, we're going to unhide sheet 5 first. Sheet 5 dot visible equals visible. Now it's going to make sheet 5 visible, and then it's going to make all the other ones invisible. It's going to prevent the looping from rehiding sheet 5. So now let's take a look. Let's see if this runs again. And you can see now the code runs flawlessly. So like I said before, there are other types of looping codes and looping procedures, but it's all essentially the same thing. It's basically telling VBA or Excel, do something, repeat it again and again and again to a collection or set of items, and once you've done it to all of them, then stop. Some of the other loops will say keep doing something until you hit a blank cell or something like that. So there are different types of loops. There's for each, do while, and do until. We're going to return to this concept of looping in future videos, so stay tuned.